Ever since Karl Čapek coined the term robot in his 1920 play, robots have been firmly entrenched in science fiction. Nowadays, they have become a scientific and technical fact that cannot be abandoned. Robots are used for cleaning, building cars, deactivating bombs, helping with surgery and the disabled, and much more. They are more common than many of us might think, and in the future, their population will grow even more. Simply put, a robot is a machine that can perform tasks normally performed by humans. Some of them are controlled by operators, some work autonomously. In shape, they range from individual robotic manipulators to full-fledged humanoid bodies. One of the main goals of some roboticists is to create a robot that looks as much like a human as possible, at least partially, in order to facilitate natural interaction between robots and humans. A robot that looks more like a human and is perceived much better. To date, there are already quite a few androids that are used in scientific research, like Reply Q2, developed by Hiroshi Ishiguro from Osaka University. Reply Q was created as a female TV presenter, and at first glance, it can be mistaken for a person. She can't walk and doesn't have sophisticated artificial intelligence, so her abilities are limited. Ishiguro also created a remote-controlled android copy of himself and named him Humanoid High, one to lecture remotely. David Hanson has created a model of an android like Philip K. Dick Indu androids dream of electric swimmers, which can recognize faces and keep up a conversation. Although none of the androids yet has full autonomy, an almost full-fledged copy of a person will certainly appear as a result of these attempts. However, for some reason, when we encounter robots that are too similar to us, we find them repulsive and creepy. Why do realistic robots scare us? Perhaps we are afraid of something that has human abilities, but does not have consciousness. Or are we afraid of losing our own uniqueness? At the moment, the answer seems more carnal than philosophical, and it lies in the effect of the sinister valley. The term sinister valley was coined by Masahiro Mori in 1970. To illustrate his idea, Mori created a graph where there was a recognition factor on the y-axis and a degree of similarity to a person on the x-axis, and depicted our sense of recognition, or the ability to identify using the example of different robotic forms or representations of a person's. Industrial robots are located somewhere near the origin point. They do not look recognizable or similar to humans. But after the peak, there is a sudden dip into the valley, which develops into a second peak depicting a living person. From Mori's point of view, our comfort level increases until the qualities of the robot acquire human forms, but do not reach the point of identification at which a person suddenly ceases to recognize the robot and gets scared. Both physical appearance and movements play a role, since non-human movements immediately send us to the sinister valley, and some films like Silent Hill are based on this. The study by Aishi Pinar Sagan, Thierry Kiminida, Hiroshi Ishiguro, John Driver, and Chris Firth used a moving robot which showed that the sinister valley effect can be caused by a discrepancy between our expectations and reality in terms of the appearance and movement of the android. The researchers performed functional magnetic resonance imaging on the participants while they watched a series of videos with Reply Q, the same android, but without skin, and a living person who performed the same actions. The brains of the participants reacted very similarly to a human and a mechanized robot. But when observing a human, like android, completely different brain regions responsible for determining and interpreting movements worked. It was concluded that, perhaps, the effect of the sinister valley is caused by something that looks human but moves in an inappropriate way. Robots move the way robots should move. People move like people, and neither the first nor the second should frighten us unless there is confusion. One of the possible evolutionary reasons for our aversion to the discrepancy between the appearance and movements of an android may be that any irregularity in a person may indicate a disease, and our brain rigidly rejects it in order to prevent its spread. A certain dissimilarity in another person can also trigger our dislike of people whom we do not consider acceptable mating partners. Whatever the underlying cause of the sinister valley, roboticists are looking for ways to get their creations out of there. There is also an opinion that robots should be social, look, and act accordingly, but only so that people are comfortable with them. Robots should not be human. The idea is to give robots enough functions that anthropomorphize them. For example, the ability to understand and maintain a conversation, recognize the emotional state of a person, and react accordingly, as well as show their own emotions and individuality. Robots should have their own shape, which is based on the purpose of the robot, but does not meet our expectations of how they should look. Mori himself stated in 1970 that designers should strive for the first peak on the chart, not the second, so as not to fall into the zone of the sinister valley. Perhaps this approach will help robots to remain invisible in our lives, but very useful. Others continue to strive for full-fledged human realism, like Ishiguro, who believes that androids can overcome the sinister valley by building up a humanoid appearance and movements. In addition to the realistic textures of hair and skin, his reply Q2 and Humanoid High. One constantly made micro-movements, blinked and moved their bodies, as if they were breathing to look more natural. Culture can also play a role. In Japan, artificial forms are more common and acceptable than in Europe. For example, there are even artificial pop stars in Japan. One is animated and the other is computer-generated. Perhaps the sinister valley may simply come to naught after the spread of androids. Maybe we'll just get used to them. This phenomenon does not happen only with robots. It happens with other forms of realistic visualization of human forms like animation. There have been many reports that people have found animated human characters in the films The Last Fantasy and Polar Express creepy or repulsive. Although both films were proud of the advanced achievements in the field of computer graphics, we can try everything from lowering realism to creating full-fledged human facial expressions in further experiments with our smaller brothers, robots. We will either have to get used to it or overcome the sinister valley, because robots and computer graphics will stay with us for a long time. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.